Okay, I'm going to go to our channel. Do you know what the millennial pause is?
I don't even know what that question means, to be honest.
Well, now you do. Streamed 8 months ago. See, I don't think we're actually live. Let me go to YouTube Studio. Sometimes it complains that we have crappy bandwidth. But let's see. Oh no, we are live streaming. So if I go to our YouTube channel, I should be able to see it. The millennial pause is what us old folks do when we start recording like a fixed video, like not a live stream, where we are literally like, we pause to wait for the recording to start because we don't think that it will start by itself. Whereas like the youngins, the young folk, they just dive right in. They have faith in the technology, whereas we still think for some reason that it like needs to warm up or whatever.
It used to warm up.
It does need to warm up. And apparently they also do this thing to mock us where they like, there you go, we're live streaming. So this is actually working. There you go, reactions. Okay, well, hello. That first part will get cut. But welcome to Flexperts Live. I am, of course, Jos, founder and CEO of Flexperts, with our newest, latest, and greatest Flexpert, Kas. Kas is specifically a Flexpert on all things Bubble. I will let Kas introduce herself. Obviously, I will then share my thoughts on Bubble. And we're going to do a little bit of a compare and contrast because I genuinely do not know much about Bubble. I have not used it since I first tried NoCode maybe 3 years ago, and I got scared, ran away. It was too complicated. Kas says it's amazing. I trust Kas, and Kas is going to try to persuade me why. And then we're going to compare a little bit about Flutterflow versus Bubble, and specifically databases. It's going to hopefully be the first in a many-part series. So over to you, Kas. Introduce yourself.
Oh, thank you so much, Jos. So I'm Kas. I have been working with Bubble for the last 2-3 years, and within that, just doing a lot of prototyping, and in the last year, getting harder and harder on actual visual development.
That's what she said.
Oh,
okay.
And I have to say that I think Bubble's database is probably one of the hardest. Taking all of that back, I have to say that I think Bubble's database is actually one of the most impactful thing that it has. And most of the projects that I would take on board when I was working at Minimum Studio, which is a specifically no-code agency that specializes in Bubble, has to do with any kind of project that is quite data heavy. And the truth is that if you want to do absolutely anything, if you want to build absolutely anything, it's going to be data heavy to a certain extent. So
I guess before we start in, let me just wind back a little bit. Let me explain what I know about Bubble and what I kind of think about Bubble and what I know. So for those of you who don't know, Bubble.io is a no-code builder. As far as I know, it builds essentially web apps. It can be responsive web apps, but it is a visual builder tool in the same way that Flutterflow is. The main difference in what we're going to focus a lot, as you see in this little GIF here, is that the database is built right in. So the database, from what I understand, is a little bit different than a Firebase. Firebase is what we call a NoSQL, meaning it's based on documents, whereas the Bubble one underneath is based on a more traditional like SQL type database, but they make it super easy to use. So am I right saying that it doesn't natively like build iOS and Android? It's web apps, but responsive web apps, right?
Yeah, they got a big chunk of investment in the last year or so, and there is a way to turn your web app into native. They are testing it out, and there are some people that swear by it, that say it's really good. Personally, I've never tried it, but
I mean, 3 million apps built on Bubble. I'm not gonna lie, that's a lot more than Flutterflow. So they are the key player in the market for sure. So that's why we actually get a lot of clients requesting kind of Bubble stuff. That's why Kas has kind of joined our little Flexperts family. So yeah, dive me into the database. How do you want to do this? Do you want to share your screen? Do you want to show us some stuff? What's the best way? How are we
let me share my screen really quickly. So First off, what do you know about SQL databases?
I mean, we can pretend that I'm pretending that I know nothing. Let's go from the basis that I know nothing, and you can believe or not believe that I do know stuff. So obviously, yeah, what I know is that the big advantage, obviously, of an SQL or Postgres is what people might have heard of it, is a relational database in a way that Firebase is not. So Firebase is based on documents and collections, and you have to kind of manually link things, whereas SQL is an older type of database, and things are naturally linked to each other. I'll stop there. It's harder. That's what I would say.
So just because I'm really interested in Flutterflow as well. So just for clarification, so that I know if you come from a Flutterflow background, what to specialize on, what to really clarify. What do you mean by link? You have to link documents, because I know a little bit about Flutterflow, but I think that's a really big distinction.
Yeah, so I guess I can actually share real quick. We can, I guess, do this a little bit backwards. We'll innovate as we go. So obviously, when Flutterflow launched, the core kind of integration was the Firebase integration. Since then, they have expanded that, and you have. Let me find a project I can actually jump into. Let's go with this one. It's fine. We'll showcase this app because they've said I can. So this is an app. Oh, this is a good one because it's actually the database is one where it might seem more logical to do it with a NoSQL. So essentially, Flutterflow made Firebase really easy, like one-click integration. And a Firebase obviously is a NoSQL database, and what that means. Hopefully, you can see my screen. Right? So what that means when you're going into Flutterflow and you're setting stuff up, you've got your kind of what you would call in MySQL tables are collections, essentially. And yes, the noise you do hear is a cat attacking stuff. Doesn't like being ignored. So we've got here users and groups. Now, this is a great example of like relationships. So somehow I need to link which users are in which groups, right? So we've got a whole bunch of groups. Every group is going to be a document. And it either needs to have essentially a list of references or document IDs, essentially, saying these users are part of this group, or else in the users document, you need to have a list of group IDs saying this is a list of which groups this user is part of. So you're constantly having to kind of do that manually, right? You're having to keep track of which things are related in some way. So like when I start a collection, I always kind of started with these same things. Like, I will put like a user. So this would be like which user has created this chat message, and then there's a document reference to a chat, meaning which chat is this chat message part of. So that's the basics of how like a NoSQL works and how things work in Flutterflow. Obviously, Flutterflow does, as I say, they do now support Superbase, which is a more traditional relational database. Does that help?
Yeah, no, it does. It does seem like more work. Let me share my screen.
What is today's flavor? I always get asked what flavor I'm chain vaping. Today is watermelon.
Hold on. There we go. All right. So I started to do what I called like grammar to understand data modeling. But I think when I told you about it, you said that grammar was a scary word.
Yeah, I didn't like school.
Yeah.
Make it simple for me.
Using sentences basically to understand data modeling, right? So I think general things to really high level basic things to know about SQL databases in many ways, it's very similar to the work that you have to do, because ultimately you need to decide how data is going to interact with each other, right? So users always need to have a name and they always need to have an email, and you need to say, okay, a user has an email and a name. An email is this type of data and a name is going to be text, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to do that either way, regardless of which software you're using. The thing about SQLs is that you need to decide those relationships first,
Mm-hmm.
and then the data will come through. And what it feels like is that in Flutterflow, you can try as you go. You can say, oh, because you have to do decisions manually, you
Exactly.
can play around a lot more, right?
There's a lot more, I would say, there's a lot more flexibility for error.
Yes.
So I think this is my impression of kind of when you're starting with a more traditional database, you really need to map it out beforehand. And if you make mistakes later or want to change your database architecture, it can be difficult. Whereas I would say my experience with Firebase is that it's quite forgiving. Like if you're just like, oh, wait, crap, I don't know. Like I will often genuinely, I will build something in kind of two different ways at the same time. And then I just kind of see which one works out better in terms of like, is it better to list all of my users in the groups document, or is it better to list the groups in the users? And sometimes I don't know, and I kind of do it both ways at the same time, and then see which way ends up working out better.
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, I do that as well. Sometimes, so sometimes, especially if you're working with types of data that you've never done before and relationships that you've never done before, 100% it's worth just like going to your software, testing it out, making a bunch of awful mistakes, and then starting from scratch again, having that knowledge, right?
Fail upwards. Fail upwards.
Yeah, exactly. I think the main difference is that with SQL, you can turn those into rules, right? So you can say, okay, so from here on onwards, I know that actually it's easier to always group users, insert users into groups instead of groups into users. And for example, and you can always also design for flexibility. So if you're like, okay, I actually don't know if in the future I'm going to have to change that thing, I'm going to make it as easy for me as possible.
So can I throw you completely off your trajectory here? And can you show me like a blank like starter app in Bubble, what that database looks like? And normally what people find I think most helpful is to see things being done, especially, it's nice for us to talk theoretically and things, and that's good for some cases, but can I see what a Bubble database looks like? Like how would you start, let's say, a basic like social media app or a basic I don't know, tasks app or something? Is it possible to show that, or does it take lots of work to set up? He said snarkily, thinking that Bubble apps might be hard to set up.
No, they're not hard to set up.
Or ones you have already.
I am working on a boilerplate, so we can have a look at the.
Yes, let's look at that boilerplate. Mr. Boilerplate, come on down. You're the next contestant on Flexperts. I have no idea, by the way, if we're using a new streaming software, and I have no idea if people are posting in the live stream comments. If you are, we may or may not be able to see them, but in general, most of the time people don't show up. So,
so this is what the Bubble database backend looks like, right? Which ultimately, and there are 3 points that you need to know. The tables, right, are called data types. So what you would call a collection, right?
Yep.
And inside of each of those data types, the data points that you're going to have are called fields, data fields, right? And then you have the actual information that goes into each one of those fields, right?
Okay. So this is nice. I'll give credit where credit's due. It's nice that you can directly go and actually look. I know that Flutterflow does have like a managed content. It's kind of the same thing, but it is nice that it's all kind of laid out one place here. That's nice. And you've got your file manager, which is Firebase storage, I guess.
There is something really cool that Bubble does that no other database does, and it really changes the way in which you have a look at data. So usually in SQL databases, you always have to store the big thing and the little thing, right? So for example, if you want to create a database with countries and cities, right? You're like, this is the question that you had. Is it easier for me to put cities in countries or countries in cities, right?
Yeah.
Do I make a folder that says, here's a list of countries with their cities, or the other way around?
Yeah.
And that's a rule. In SQL, you always go small to large.
Okay.
Which is counterintuitive, because if I say the sentence, I need a database with a list of countries, and in each country, I need to connect a list of cities, that's large to small. I'm thinking country, and then I'm thinking city, because that's the way in which us humans logically think. the way that you have to input that in the database is actually the other way around. You have to go into cities and you have to connect them with countries because it's easier, right? Because ultimately, you're going to have that relationship is going to be easier to search, the loading is going to be faster, etc.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to do that in Bubble. In Bubble, you can actually go large to small. You can say, I want a list. So, for example, I'm going to say country,
Mm-hmm.
and each country it's going to have a city, but I'm going to say, and this is the mad thing, this field is a list of multiple entries.
Okay, so it's an array, yeah.
Exactly. So it allows you to create lists.
And by default, is this going to be, is that, and by the way, shouldn't it be cities? Shouldn't the field be cities?
Yes, but
Okay.
There's a reason.
If it's supposed to be city, it's city. But okay, my question is,
there's a reason for this, but yes.
No, then do it the way. Don't let me break it.
No. It's a lot easier.
But my question is, are those going to be the names of the cities or the IDs of the cities?
Clarify.
Because there's going to be a table that's going to be a record, a separate table for cities, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
No.
so you're just putting the name.
No.
Got it.
Okay.
This is nice.
Yeah. So okay. So these are the cities, right?
Okay. Barcelona.
Country.
So that's my name of my country, right? Okay. This is nice. I like how you can, it's quick to go and make like fake data. That's nice.
Yeah, and there are different, there's a lot of stuff in terms of specifically user experience that Bubble is not great at. But the community is so big, you actually have about 1 million plugins. So
yeah, that was where I got lost. Well, no, I got lost in many places when I first tried Bubble. I tried to use a template. It just did not work.
I kind of agree with the general stance of this looked really difficult. And then the logic was explained to me, and then...
And what's the slug, by the way, out of curiosity?
The slug is a manual unique ID. So each one of these has a unique ID, but
by default, it's giving each of these records a unique ID, and Bubble's kind of handling that in the background, in the same way that Flutterflow creates your document IDs uniquely in the background. But I can also give it a manual, and I can use either then.
For example, my slug is going to be UK.
That's nice.
Right. So this is something that traditionally you wouldn't do in a way in which you organize data in sequence, right? You don't have a list of countries with cities. What you would do is you would have a list of cities, and inside of them,
you would link it.
You would link it.
You would say this is part of Spain, and potentially. And does that mean, out of curiosity, so let's take the example of like Springfield. Yeah, if we were doing states of the U.S., right? Springfield notoriously is a city that is in many, many different states. Yeah. Would that mean that would I have one record for Springfield, or would I have one record for Springfield, Illinois, Springfield, pick another state, Pennsylvania, whatever. Yeah. Or would I only need to then have one record for that city? Because I mean, they're going to have different properties, right? They're actually different physical locations. So I guess I would have different records.
Yeah, you would have different records. I think that's more of like a general question of how do you want to structure it? Because it would be really the question is, how do you want to search that information? So for example, if you are like, I don't want to know, I just want a list of names of every single city in the US. And I don't want to see duplicates because the duplicates are not a concern to me because I just want a list of all the names, right? That would be a different search, and you would have to structure in a different way to saying, I want a list of every single city, regardless of whether the name is the same or not. But even then, there is a way to say to Bubble, hey, if it has the same name, don't show it. Avoid duplicates, right?
Okay.
Like filter out all the things that just look the same. So really, you do have to think about, in the same way as you do Flutterflow, exactly how do I want this data to be used.
Okay, so we do not see comments. That's good to know.
You what?
We don't see comments. I was just checking whether we saw comments from the live stream. We do not. But it's okay. I've got them on my phone. Don't worry. If anybody shows up and asks questions,
Pardon?
I will handle them.
Hmm.
Okay, so this is interesting. So do you want me to show you how I would do this in Flutterflow?
Yeah.
We can go step by step, or do you want to
Mhm.
keep going?
I want to see how you would do it in Flutterflow.
Okay.
Out of curiosity.
So now is the awkward moment where I was like, I'm going to make fun of you for not having something prepared. And now I don't have anything prepared, but that's fine. Because I probably shouldn't just put random collections into this client setup. So let me just really quickly we'll go through. It's a good process for everyone. Let's create a new app. We'll call it the live stream. Yeah. New page, yeah, whatever. So if I was going to do that, probably you've got a few ways you can do this. We could start with countries here, and we can create that as a, yeah, that's fine. It doesn't like the fact that let's try the new, fancy new Flutterflow create a project. Flex money that you can. Hopefully that gets blurred out. Remember one time when Dimitar and I were doing this, and Dimitar was just like, blur out my email. I was like, okay, sorry. So Flutterflow is going to create your project for you on Firebase, which is nice. Which hopefully will make this error message go away. It takes 3 to 5 minutes. Anyway, so I've got first my, let's say my countries, and we're just going to start with a basic field of like created time. Because this is static data, I'm not actually going to put like which user created this country. So let's just say we have a name of the country, string, blah, blah, blah. And maybe like, maybe we want to have the currency code or something, which is going to be another string, blah, blah, blah. And ultimately we need a list of the cities. Yeah. So in the same way you can do it, you could do an array of strings and have that be the list of all the cities in the country. That array is going to be insanely long for certain countries. Obviously, there are hundreds of thousands in most countries, unless we're talking about some tiny, I don't want to name and shame somebody's country for being small. But so if you were going to do that, you then have two options. You could either do a cities collection as a top level collection on the same level as your countries. And we can do, again, a created time. Whoops, not a created time. There's a date and time. We can do a name for that city. We could give it, each document is going to, actually I can start firing that up hopefully soon. The name, and then we could put a country, and we could specify that as a string. We could also put a country ID field and also specify that as a string. That's essentially going to be the unique ID for that document, those long randomly assigned ID numbers. Or we could put a country ref, and that's going to be a document ref, and that's going to link to countries. And so then when we were searching, if we were browsing through like a list of countries, so you're trying to find in a UX, let's say, you're trying to display the users. Okay, I want to show, I'm just going to make this a column here, row, text, add a little bit of padding here, 20. Okay, I'm now going to query here my list of countries, query collection, countries, list of documents. Let's say I order them by the name. Boom. And then what's going to happen is this is going to be linked to the name of the country's document. the name. Yeah. So now I'm going to have Algeria, Albania, etc., all the way down, right? And now, obviously, what I want the user is, let's say we divide the page in two. So I'm going to wrap this in. Does not want me to wrap this in a column. Let's wait. Maybe I just hit the wrong. Oh, I hit the wrong thing. That's why. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this. I'm just going to duplicate this here. Add an extra. Just going to add an extra row in between. So this we're just going to call. This is going to be the cities for that country. Yeah. So cities for selected country, right? And this is going to be a query of the cities. And instead, we're going to order them by name still. We're going to filter them by the, let's say, country ref, yeah? Now, which country ref? Well, we need to, whichever one we selected. So let's put like a little action on here. And what we're going to do is go local state, selected country, ref. Feel free to interrupt and ask questions. This is like a super crash course in Flutterflow. But I'm going to now update the local state. I'm going to update that with whichever set value to whichever item in the list, which is going to be here. And we're going to pick the document reference. Yeah. So what's going to happen basically is when I click on the name of a country, it's going to temporarily store into my local state, whichever one that I've picked. And then this query is going to filter based on, we're going to look for that, change this to cities. And we're going to filter out by the country ref is equal to the country ref in the page state that we picked. So that's how I would then get the list of the cities in that country. Any questions? Did that make any sense at all?
Yeah, I think the main difference that I'm seeing is that once I create the correlation in Bubble and I can mimic this.
I'll stop sharing. Oh, this is actually like educational, I feel like. That's so rare for my live streams. Do you want to share your screen so we can see you work your magic on Bubble?
Yeah, hold on. I'm just trying to decide whether I want a new page or not.
I'm my mother's savage daughter. Oh, I found a piece of chocolate on the floor. Is it gross to eat it?
Depends. What does it look like?
There's no cat hair on it, which is surprising in my house.
Oh, there you go. I say go for it.
Peer pressure. Oh, it was worth it. That was a solid decision. All right, so we're in the Bubble Builder here. I'm looking at a web page. I'm looking at a repeating group, which I'm guessing is a list view of some sort.
Yes. So ultimately, what I don't want to do this. Let's do this first. All right. I am going to go away for a second because I don't know if you can see it, but my Mac battery is about to die.
Okay.
Give me one
I'll
second.
do a song and dance. Don't worry. Beep, 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 beep. While Kaz goes through this, I'm going to walk through what I just built a little bit slower. Kick off her screen share. Spotlight off. I'm going to take the spotlight back here. Oops, except I shared the wrong thing. It would help if I shared the right thing. Let's try and make a 90-second clip here, which I'm terrible at doing. So essentially what we built here, just to recap, is we're setting up a basic, how would I, in a user onboarding, we want them to be able to select the city that they're from. So what we've done is we've created two collections, a Oh, Kaz is back. I didn't even get to finish. I'm going to try anyway. 90 seconds. What we did was we created a collection for countries and a collection for cities. This is obviously fixed data that is your users aren't going to be changing. And there is obviously a relationship between cities and countries. And the way we're doing that is we're setting up a country ref, a document reference linking the amount of cities. And you can get this data from some fixed data source or wherever. On the page, what we've done is we've created basically a half and half page. And the second half is going to be for the cities, to display the cities, and the first half is going to be for the countries. And I'm going to set the second half of the page to not be visible unless the page state, which is the selected country ref, is set. So that's going to make sure that that part doesn't show up until the user clicks on one of these countries. What we did here was we did a basic query, and we're sorting them by the name, and we're querying the countries just to get all of the countries. Once the user then selects one of those countries, which we've done here with an action, what we're doing is we're updating a page state, and we're setting the document reference for that specific country in the list. At that point, it then makes this, obviously, ta-da, becomes visible, and the query that runs on this has a filter on it to filter to get the cities, but only the cities that have that specific country reference in their properties, and then orders them by name. So now the user can go ahead and, for instance, select the city and navigate to the next page, and you can save that information to the database. So that's just a quick recap of what we did there. Over to you, Kaz. We can't hear you. You're on mute. There you go. By the way, this is so much better for live streaming than the other tools we've used in the past. I'm loving this.
Yeah?
Yeah, like Restream and all those third-party tools. This one's amazing. So what I've got here, yeah. So this is kind of similar. I'm just going to talk as you build. But so this is a page group, full page group. So am I looking at one page of like a web app, basically? So there's a nav bar on the top, I'm assuming.
Okay, yeah, so I'm just deciding, because I'm trying to mimic your example. So I'm just deciding what to do.
I mean, my example may not make sense in a bubble world. I don't know. So we got choices, dynamic choices. My head hurts. It's so funny when you're so used to something, then you see something else. It does take a little bit of like wrapping your head around.
All right, hold on.
Okay. Is there like a widget tree in Bubble? What's the, like, you know how I had like my widget layout, like a tree for the page, like to see which elements are on my page?
Yeah.
Okay. I see. So the bottom half of that is how I add new stuff. And then I get it. They're called by they're not called like columns and rows. They're just called things. Okay, I'm with you. Do you have columns and rows? Is that a thing?
Yeah. Hold up. So I want my cities.
Data source. Joins. That sounds very SQL-y. SQLian? Can we make that a thing? SQLian?
We can.
Okay, so you got like a formula here. Okay.
Give me a second. I just can't remember what I've done.
That's fine. And you have a search bar. That's nice. So is the search bar then integrated already?
Yes. So in the search bar, you can basically go through every single one of these
cool.
elements, which I think is
so
very.
Those are my different widgets, basically, right?
Yes. Exactly.
And did you say that the community has like there are plugins that are widgets essentially? So you can add to that?
Yeah. Some of them are, so for example, in Bubble, you don't have a drop down.
In Flutterflow,
you have a drop down, but you don't have a multi-select drop down. So for example,
okay.
there's a widget that.
So you can, that's nice.
Or like if you don't like the icons that are given natively, there is like a plugin that allows you
That's
to
cool.
have nicer icons.
So
Basically.
these are like Kaz's top 6 plugins.
I mean, sure. There's some that are completely free. There's some that are actually bubbles, like the API connector. This is something that definitely deserves another call of these.
Yeah, no, we can talk about API calls for sure.
Yeah, because it is actually just.
I think there's a limitless amount of these we can do. It's really fascinating to see how something works in a slightly different platform.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, give me 1 second.
Yeah. I know it's hard to build when I'm peppering you with stupid questions, but
No, it's fine. It's just I think I'm being collecting with someone downstairs. Hold on.
okay. Well, Kaz, deal. Please hold. Kaz will return in a moment. I'm going to go back to this and just show some of the other little things that we could do. We might as well keep building this out. So what would come next? I noticed that Kaz in Bubble had a search bar, and that's kind of an interesting one. The question being, how do you search? And it seems like from what Kaz was showing this far, that actually might be something that's a little bit easier in Bubble than in Flutterflow. So if we wanted to make a search, because obviously there's going to be a lot of countries, and just a little fun fact, because this is going to have more than 20 records, we'd actually not want to use a column view. We would actually want to use, I'm going to replace this with a list view, which is what it's not going to like me doing a list view. I'm going to expand that, and then now it will let me do a list view. And that's going to have them much, and that's going to still scroll. Those automatically scroll. So let's take away our cities here. And I guess I should make that the same. I'm going to wrap this then in a column. I'm going to move this copy variable to hide that whole thing here. And default, always default values are good. Default, we like default values. So now I can turn that off. So now this whole column, that whole column with the list of cities. Oh, that's why. There we go. So now we can hide that whole thing. So we've got our list here. So then the question is, how do you search? How do we search this list to minimize it? And the best way in this situation, because of the amount of countries, what I would probably do is I would take this backend query and I would, let's just put it here on the top of the page for now. We're going to paste that. So that's going to give me all of the countries documents. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to change this. I'm going to remove this so it's not a direct query anymore. It's going to call it country, meaning that each item in the list is a country. And I'm going to generate those things rather than directly from the query. I'm going to generate them from the query at the top of the page rather than the query directly on the list view. And then I have to rehook this up. It's a little bit annoying, but it's fine. So now you see you have country item. That means item in the list. So that's going to be the name. And then the action that we put here is going to be the same, except it's going to come now from country item because the query, again, the query is at the very top of the page, and then we're generating from the results of that query. What does that allow us to do? Well, now we have access to all of those country documents when we're searching. So we can actually set up a, let's say, on change or on submit, but let's say on change. And what we're going to do is we're going to look for the action simple search. And the searching is going to be documents. We are going to search through this list of documents. Hello, guys. And we're going to search the names. And the search term is going to be coming from our widget state, our text field here. And we can put max results 30. The final part of this is essentially to set this. Right now, this is not reactive to the simple search. And what we would want to do is we would want to do a conditional value. And we want to have it be first has the user actually typed in everything? So our first condition is basically the widget state, the text field. If it is set and not empty, then what we want to do is we want to display the simple search results. However, if the user has not typed everything, meaning it is not set or it is empty, we're going to be displaying the normal full list of country documents. I have a feeling that the way Kaz might show us that it's done in Bubble, I actually feel like is a little bit simple. You'll notice here I need to actually manually set the return type to be document. It's going to be a list of documents, no matter whether it's from the simple search. Okay, back over to you, Kaz.
That's interesting.
I was filling some time with some extra content.
Oh, great. Sorry, that took a minute.
Because I feel like the way search works in Bubble is easier, and that is one of the advantages I think of MySQL.
So from what I just caught the tail end of that, but from what I saw, I do think that you have to, in Flutterflow, you have to be a lot more specific with what you want to do, because obviously the relationship is not as clear because you haven't created it from the get-go, right?
Exactly.
So right now what I have is, okay, so I've literally just dragged, and you come here, you have a drop down, you can drag and drop it, and then you're basically saying, okay, what information do I want on this drop down, right? And so you're literally just saying, it can be static, so I can actually say Spain and United Kingdom, right? I can write it down, but because we're using the database, we're going to say it's dynamic.
Okay, so that's the same as like from variable, basically, yeah.
Exactly, and then we're like, okay, so I want countries, or I want to look through cities, I want, right, etc., etc. And then I've created what I saw was very similar to you, and here it's called a repeating group.
Okay, and so that's the widget is called a repeating group. That's like a list, basically. Okay,
exactly. So this is going to display whatever it is that you really wanted to display. And so, for example, here it's a text, and I wanted to be whatever the value of the drop down, so whatever I'm clicking, and the city that's connected to that.
That's right? Cool.
And so this still works on this like if then system. But so now if I say Spain, I've got my list, and if I say United Kingdom, I've got my list, right? And you would do this,
but yeah, that makes sense to me.
Sorry?
I couldn't see what you were saying typing United Kingdom, but I could imagine.
Oh,
I think maybe you were sharing a different tab or something.
Okay, hold on.
There you go.
Very good. So now if I click Spain,
that is very cool.
There's the Spain United Kingdom.
I will say that is easier.
Yes.
Well, it's fewer steps. I mean, obviously I build at lightning speed, but
I do agree that it is fewer steps, and you do need to have a little mental map of what you're doing, right? So I'm saying, okay, it took me a minute. I was like, wait, what did I actually do? Okay, so I have to, and this is why I think the using sentences or using grammar or just using kind of visualization is helpful, because you're like, okay, well, I have to first go to countries, and then I want the list of them, and then I want to see the value of the countries or whichever country I'm clicking and the city that's connected to that, right?
And let's say if we had more like properties about each city and I wanted to display those, how would you in Bubble, like how would I select London and then have on like the right side of the page maybe, information about that city?
So if, for example, in here, we would also have...
I think you're on the other tab again, sorry. You can share your whole screen. We don't mind seeing your porn. It's fine.
No.
The maturity level of these live streams just goes down and down and down.
It really would depend. So, for example, if I now want to say, okay,
events. That's good. That's more creative. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So each city should have an event. I'm going to connect this to a city, right? Yeah.
So you're literally, so this is like having a doc, but as soon as you do that, it then just allows you to do a lot of things that in Flutterflow you essentially have to do manually.
Exactly. But you do have to sit down and be like, okay, and also almost like think for growth. always be like, okay, well, at any other point, am I going to do exactly what you asked? Do I want to then display a list of events that are happening on each city? Yeah.
But why is that? It seems like you can just link anything to anything.
Yes. Which basically means that you can get really complex with how you group data, how you filter it,
Interesting.
and then how you visualize it as well. There's a bunch of, again, you can't do this natively, but there's a bunch of plugins for graphs. And then, like I think there's one that is really good, Timo. So Apex Charts. This is actually an amazing plugin that basically allows you to do really complex visualizations of data. So a lot of the really big companies that are using these are actually using it for internal data purposes and saying, okay, I need to look at millions and millions of data rows a day, and I want to visualize it in this way.
And what is the initial load time for a Bubble web app? Like on first page load, is it fast?
This is
Because
the
that's like the number one thing probably about Flutterflow. Like I had a client the other day who was making like a wish list app or something. And like the fact that a Flutterflow app, the very first time you load that page is going to be 20 megabytes needing to be downloaded. It's going to be 5-10 seconds or something, which after that, it's perfectly fine. But for that first load, for something like, an e-commerce store or something where the user is expecting it to be instant, it's kind of a pain point that is a Flutter thing more than a Flutterflow thing.
Mm. It really, so there are pros and cons. So can you paginate in Flutterflow?
I mean, yeah, you have to do it manually, obviously. Yeah, I mean, you can do it. Well, you can do it. Flutterflow is like Lego blocks. I loved Lego as a kid. You can build anything, but yeah, paginate. You can either do it with custom code. You can do it with infinity scroll, which is just going. That's the easiest way to paginate. So that's the most natural. It's only loading 25 items at a time, so you can go through a infinite, yeah, as it says, infinity scroll, right? So that's the easiest, and that's just a tick box you turn on.
So there is so first of all, I think pagination sounds like it's a little bit easier in Bubble. You do just have a little plugin that is very easy to use that allows you to control how much information you get on each page and yada yada. From there on, depending on how much data you have to show, Bubble has pros and cons. So for example, if you're doing lists will be faster than doing like a normal search if it's less than like 50 points of data. If it's more than that, then you need to paginate, then you should search for the information in a different way because the loading time is going to change.
But what about like can you build like a basic landing page, just like with no data being drawn in, just like, and it will load as fast as a Webflow page would load?
Yeah. The only limit that it has is when you're loading really big chunks of data because the database allows you to do so much stuff, right?
No, I mean that's the biggest thing with Flutterflow is just basically not being able to have an initial like page or something. It's like the whole app has to load before you can show anything.
Oh, so I completely misunderstood that question. Yeah, no, that's really not an
So
issue.
like if you go to the Flexperts portal or something, the first time you load it, it's going to take you 15 seconds before you get to that sign in log up screen, even though there's no data being pulled in. And that's just the nature of Flutter rather than Flutterflow.
Right. So no.
Or Flutter Web, I should say specifically. Obviously for a mobile app, it's no different. But
that's really not an issue. I'm gonna share because it's like the thing that I can share. I'm gonna share my portfolio page. This is like a very simple landing page, and has like no data on it, or like very little data on it.
Very nice.
And it just it loads like pretty.
Is that instant load?
Yeah.
Is the Minimum Studio page built in? I'm going to plug Minimum Studio here.
No, it's not.
Because that's my favorite website of all time.
It's not because it's just older than when they specialized in Bubble. So I think originally they were like doing all kinds of no-code stuff, and so it was built on Webflow. And but I think they are rebuilding it now in Bubble because you can do a lot of stuff.
Interesting.
Yeah. So as far as like landing, it is a web app. So as long as your Wi-Fi is working, it's pretty straightforward.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I mean, what we recommend for one of the things we recommend basically one of the cool things about any Flutterflow app is that it can be embedded in an iframe. So what that means is you can actually have your landing page built in Webflow, and you can basically have your entire Flutterflow app as the sign up onboarding process, just embedded directly. All you need is just that URL, just embed it directly. And so it makes that handover from, intent to purchase to actually onboarding really pain-free. It's something I highly recommend. It's actually really cool because even in because obviously Webflow doesn't have a database. Let's say you want like a currency converter or something, you could actually build it as a little Flutterflow mini app as just a widget and then just embed it in your Webflow app, which is pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. Yeah. You can do something similar with Bubble, especially it's just, but I think that is a pro of Webflow, to be honest. I think that
Webflow, for Flutterflow.
Yeah, or just in general, because you can embed. We have. Oof, I got like a weird whiplash there. Edit that out. So
none of this is getting edited out. This is going raw, uncompressed. All right, so if I think we have almost covered. Was there anything else you wanted to cover, or you want to learn about Flutterflow? I think I'd like to do lots more of these.
Yeah, I think I have tons and tons of more questions, but I think this
ask away.
No, I think just specifically in terms of how hard it is, for example, to when you have an app with tons and tons of data, like tons of data rows.
Does it perform well, you mean?
Yeah.
The cool thing about NoSQL versus SQL, and this is maybe is that when you the collection size doesn't matter actually. So you can have 2 million documents in a collection. Let's say you had 2 million cities, right? And that's your query will perform at the same speed as if you have 200 cities. If you're only getting, let's say you're getting 10 results from 2 million, is the same speed as getting 10 results from 200. And that is a big advantage, I believe, in the way that they work underneath. Is that there is essentially, you don't have to worry about collections growing too big.
That is a weirdly good point.
Because I believe in Bubble, like you have to kind of worry, right? Like you have to manage your collection, your table sizes, essentially.
Well, yeah, you have to just be aware of the pros and cons in which you filter the data, because some of them are going to take longer than others. But more than that, the Bubble did like a change in, I don't know how much you pay for Flutterflow, or like if there's any kind of limit on data points on Flutterflow, but there is on Bubble.
So I mean, so with Firebase you have a free allowance basically. So with Firebase, most projects do not. I always say if you end up having to pay for Firebase, it's a good problem to have, because that means your app has traction. For most projects in Firebase, you won't pay while you're developing it. You'll obviously pay for Flutterflow, but that's entirely separate. That's your just fee to use Flutterflow, which is $80 a month or something.
For Bubble now, I'm going to share my screen because it's actually quite a good thing to know. /share. Now, it used to be that this is not something that existed. You just had a subscription, but now you have like what they call workload units.
Yeah.
And that basically means that you do have to control how many data points do you have, how much storage do you have, and then depending on, again, like you said, it's a good problem to have if you are using a lot of if you're doing a lot of workloading. It probably means that there's a lot of users, people are clicking on stuff.
That's interesting.
Stuff like that. And so there is something that's something to take into consideration. I would say. And it's still no code for the amount of that it is.
I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, you can't get a real developer to look at something for. As I always say, even if you can't build your app or your project entirely in no code, you will save yourself a fortune by building as much of it as you can before hiring a real developer. Exactly. And there's always going to be, even if you can only build the login and the sign up page, you'll still save yourself a day of developer time. So it's always better to. And I think I would say the conclusion from this talk is clearly that Bubble is Betamax and Flutterflow is VHS, which shows how old I am. What's the other one? Or HD, DVD, and Blu-ray. There we go. I think Kaz agrees. I won't even let her say otherwise because I know she agrees. They agree with me.
That really is telling of your age, man.
I know. That's not what I'm poking my eyes at about. That's fine. But maybe you didn't notice, but we'll edit that part out. So yeah, if you are building something in Bubble or interested in having a talk about learning more, you can contact Kas, our resident Flexpert in Bubble, to get a one-to-one. And you can find Kas's profile at app.flexperts.dev/meet/Kas. If you want more content, if you have other things that you want us to talk about, please leave us in the comments. Like, subscribe, etc., etc. All the stuff I'm supposed to say at the start of the live stream. And we'll definitely be making more of these to go through other things because I just want to learn more about Bubble. I think it's fascinating. And yeah.
Nice
Any
one.
final words?
Speak soon. No? All good.
Adios, amigos.
Please edit this.
Never.